What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, December 16th, 2019, start of a brand new week here. And it looks like we only have 9 days to go before Christmas. So especially if you have to send something through the post office and everything, you need to get it on out. And we basically, Claire and I got the last of ours done this weekend. We got our tree set up. That's all in the living room, blinking away here. We're really not competition for the rest of the homes in this area, which put on every Christmas what they call the Festival of Lights, which is that everybody, they sort of light up their homes like National Lampoon's Christmas Holiday, the one with Chevy Chase, where he's got like so many lights on the house. When they plug it all in, they have to, turn on the spare reactor over at the power station. But there are some homes in this area that do go like totally overboard because, first of all, there is a prize. The Homeowners Association puts out a prize every year for the most, well, it's kind of subjective. How do you decide what's the best decorated home? Certainly the most garish and, the most amperage is definitely going to go a long way. But normally where we live is a gated community. You're not allowed in unless you have a special little sticker on the car or a little plastic card that opens the gate for you. But for Saturday night, last Saturday night, and this coming Saturday night, they basically open the gates and anybody can drive on through, and there are little arrows that have been placed up to take you to the really spiffier homes, of which we are not one. But we've at least made the effort to sort of blend in here for Christmas. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. Okay? Now, the big question right now, this is the week when it is expected the House of Representatives will vote through on those articles of impeachment and send them on to the Senate. There have been two complications that have happened. The first is the Supreme Court basically yanked the rug out of the obstruction of Congress charge, saying that Congress's request for information from the White House was inappropriate, and the White House was within its rights to refuse. So that one has been pretty much smoked by the Supreme Court. The other issue, of course, is that a lot of these Democratic representatives are getting cold feet. They are hearing from the constituents in their districts here. And remember, representatives, they're up for re-election, every single election. So everybody who's in that House of Representatives right now, they have to listen to what their constituents are saying. And if they ignore their constituents, it is at their own personal political peril. So people are asking if Pelosi actually has the votes to impeach. And it's kind of hard to keep track because a lot of people are saying, well, I don't think I'm going to vote for impeachment. Then, of course, there's some backroom arm twisting, and they'll come out and they say, yes, I'm going to go ahead and vote to impeach. And, Pelosi's obviously trying to keep it together. In at least one case, a Democratic representative has changed parties, gone over to the Republicans, sort of get away from all of this coercion on the Democratic side. But there is a slight possibility that the House will not be able to vote through the articles of impeachment and send them on to the Senate. Now, if they go on to the Senate, the GOP is now pushing for a week-long Senate trial, during which the GOP gets to call a lot of Democratic witnesses and say, what was your part in the creation of this Christopher Steele dossier? Who was getting the money, so forth and so on. And of course, the Democrats are freaking out about that. They just, we've already impeached him. Just go ahead and convict him and get him out of the Oval Office here because, poor Hillary's waiting in the wings here. And she's just having conniptions trying to figure out if she's going to step in or not. So we'll see, this is the week that's going to do it. And notice they're running it right up to Christmas, because if they try and vote for impeachment and they come up short, it's going to be a huge scandal for the Democrats. They're going to want you distracted by, your Christmas celebrations, your Christmas turkey, the New Year's parades, football games, whatever else is going on out there. They don't want you paying attention. So I think it's significant that they're dragging this out like that. Now, we do know that the reason they delayed the vote from Thursday night to Friday is the Democrats wanted more TV coverage, which didn't really work. Not a lot of people have tuned in to watch this coverage. They're sick and tired of it. They know it's a sham. Now, Rudy Giuliani has been over in Ukraine carrying out some research, and he has basically uncovered a huge money laundering operation involving the Biden family and Burisma, the natural gas company, and apparently records are showing that the prosecutor who had been investigating Burisma, the one that Biden demanded be fired or he was going to hold up $1 billion in aid to Ukraine, somebody tried to poison him. And apparently he barely survived. So there's some serious corruption going on there when they're out there, poisoning people like that. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. But Giuliani, he's grinning like the Cheshire Cat these days as he goes around Washington, D.C., and he's sort of like teasing the fact that more is yet to come. And he's got the goods regarding this whole money laundering operation. And it's implied that it extends beyond just the Bidens. So we'll see. Anyway, James Comey, former FBI head, is out on TV defending the FBI against some of the allegations made in Michael Horowitz's Inspector General report. And Comey's basic attitude is there was no political bias. There was no intention to harm the president. We were just being bumbling idiots. Okay? Think of the Keystone Cops, with modern guns and badges, and that's kind of where we are right now. Well, I don't know about you, but that's grounds to fire the FBI in and of itself. You don't need to prove political bias. They're basically, their defense is we're incompetent. We're bozos. I'm with the FBI and I'm going to go on out here and I'll figure something to do. Fire them just on those grounds. Fire them for incompetency, of not being able to do the job properly, of not being able to follow the correct protocols. Comey's out there saying, well, he's really sorry for the sloppy Russia investigation. Okay, sloppiness. There's grounds to fire the top level of the FBI. We're not bad guys. We're just sloppy, dumb idiots. You should stand with us because there's nothing more American than being a dumb, sloppy idiot. So Trump got on Twitter, and taunted Comey saying, where's my apology? And Trump has a valid point. Due to what Comey insists was just sheer incompetence and sloppiness on their part, they put Donald Trump through the ringer over the last couple of years. And Trump is owed an apology, and Trump has got grounds to fire the entire upper echelon of the FBI just on the issue of incompetence. He doesn't need to prove there was political bias. He doesn't need to prove that they were actually out to get him. All he has to do is say, look, even they are saying this is all just stupidity. They didn't follow the rules. They didn't follow procedure. They just went on out and they did all this dumb stuff. And we cannot have dumb people running the FBI. All right, getting on back to our primary race. Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are splitting the lead in the latest Democratic poll before another debate in Los Angeles. But the former VP sees his lead in South Carolina slashed. It's definitely falling apart. Apparently, Joe Biden held a rally in San Antonio, Texas. Only 83 people showed up. And one of those basically confronted him and just hollered from the audience, "You are never going to be president." All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Joe in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, he's never going to be president. And you sound a lot better than last week, so it sounds like you're adjusting to Indiana in the winter. So I'm glad to hear that.
Well, you know,
last week. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I am dealing with old age and some other issues, but I am, one of the reasons we moved here to Santa Claus is we have family who are medical professionals. And so we're getting both Claire and I are getting a much higher degree of higher quality of medical care than we were ever getting on Hawaii.
Well, that's definitely nice to have. I have a nurse practitioner living right in one of my guest house, so it always comes in handy. So as I get older, I'm like you. I had a caller last week, a young guy talking about activism and how we have to get active and everything. And I just wanted to call some attention to that young idealist about, from my experience as an activist and a protester. And one thing, the reason I'm calling is I was watching today, they showed Nadler, and he was being confronted by protesters, and right away you saw 3 or 4 armed police. And then the week before, I saw Schiff confronted by protesters, and there was a couple policemen there with machine guns. And I look back at the Kavanaugh hearings, and I saw a lot of Republicans getting confronted back then. Mitch McConnell at his house with his wife and people in elevators. I never saw the police when the Republicans were being confronted. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because there's a double standard. If you think you go to Washington, D.C., and you protest like the left does, and you're not going to end up beaten over the head or arrested, you're in for an awakening. When you're on the right, when you're a patriot, when you're against globalism, and you're standing up for patriotism, you're going to find that everybody's against you there, even the Rhino Republicans. You're going to get the book thrown at you. I remember being at a protest and the Fed rally at Jacksonville Federal Reserve, and there were snipers on the roof, and they were pointing guns at us, rifles at us, peaceful, law-abiding patriots. But you see, we were patriots. We're on the wrong side. Now, Antifa, they'd never point guns at Antifa. They protect Antifa. But if you're a Proud Boy or you're protesting something that's politically incorrect, they will beat you up. They will throw the book at you. That guy at Charlottesville, he ran over that lady because he felt threatened. He's looking at life in prison. And I just want the people that protest to realize, I protested 9/11 Truth. I had an FBI agent named Paul Gleddy, or Dave Gleddy. He wrote a book. Now, I wasn't in the book, but he tried to recruit me into some kind of a racist Orlando protest against black crime. Well, it came out that the FBI orchestrated this whole protest. But he told me, I didn't know, out of the blue, to try to get me involved in this, to discredit me, and to take me away from my movement of 9/11 DVD distribution and stuff. So it was my own government trying to entrap me, and this is the kind of thing you can look forward to if you want to be an activist. And I'm not trying to say not to be an activist. I'm saying to be a smart activist. And
I understand that the other side plays dirty.
And not just that, it's not just, it's like the rules won't apply to you. You'll see the rules that give these protesters all kinds of, if they're on the left. But don't think that they're going to give you all that kind of slack. No. You can see Antifa, and they'll run around, and they'll break windows. But if you think that you can do anything like that without getting the book thrown at you and beaten over the head, look what they're doing in France to those yellow jackets, They're all populists. But meanwhile, if the Muslims burn down their part of town and overturn cars and burn them up, the police won't be there. But if you're a populist and you believe in, the ending immigration and any anti-globalism, those The police are using them for target practice. They're shooting them in the head with rubber bullets. I mean, and they're getting German police because the French police won't even do it. And you can expect the same treatment in the United States. I mean, remember those guys out there in Nevada, those ranchers? And
yes.
they had the same thing. They had snipers point. They were going to shoot a whole bunch of civilians. And it wasn't until other American protesters also had sniper rifles and pointed them at the agents that they stood down. But they would have gladly killed. And how about that guy Levi Finnegan? Remember him?
Yes, I remember him.
They just shot him in cold blood, and Randy Weaver and the people at Waco. So, you know, this whole thing about you think you live in a free country and you can protest. You can protest if you're doing a protest that's approved, that's kosher, that the globalists and the establishment like Antifa or civil rights or things like that. But not anymore. Not if you're on the right and you're a patriot and you're anti-globalist, you're not going to be able. If you go on Capitol Hill with a MAGA hat and you start screaming at Nadler, the guys with the machine guns are going to be right next to you. Trust me.
Yeah.
So I just wanted that young fellow to know that and to realize that if you're effective, they will try to entrap you. They will try to subvert you. They're real dirty people. They really are dirty people. And I mean, the guy who tried to entrap me wrote a book. His name was I think either Dave or Paul Gleddy. And he wrote a book that he was an FBI informant, and he went after activists, and he tried to entrap people. And he had the own FBI organizing an anti-black crime rally in Orlando. You can Google that if you'd like. And they tried to get me involved in that. I told the guy, look, I'm into 9/11 truth. I don't really give a damn about this. But anyway, I just wanted people to know that it's because you get a false sense of how free this country is when you watch the left protest. The left is protected. The left gets escorts.
Yes.
But if you're on the right, you're going to get the baton, and when you go before a judge, they're gonna keep you in jail. You're not going to get out in an hour or two. I see Jane Fonda protesting. She's out in 10 minutes. If Jane Fonda was protesting for right-wing causes, she'd spend a couple nights in prison. I'll guarantee you. That's just the way it is.
Well, I mean, we're saying that happened in Great Britain right now in the wake of the general election. That was an absolute disaster for the Labour Party. Now, all of a sudden, Antifa is starting riots all across Great Britain. You know, and they're behaving the same way they did here in the United States right after Hillary Clinton lost in 2016. You know, we refuse to accept that the voters went a different direction, and you know we're going to trash cities and cause all kind of violence. And one of the ironies is they wound up trashing cities that had actually voted for Hillary, but it didn't really matter. The goal there was to just, you know, cause a lot of noise and ruckus and get people too scared to vote their own conscience in the future.
Yeah, well, in Great Britain, if you say something against gays or immigrants or anything politically incorrect, boy, they'll storm your house and you'll go to prison now. They'll put you in jail. But they'll let these, like I said, it all depends which side you're on, whether you're allowed to protest, whether you have a voice or not. It's very Orwellian where we are at right now. But I tell you, I'm going up to New York for Christmas, and I'm wearing my MAGA hat because this whole thing with impeachment, it's really made me wear my MAGA hat a lot more. I wear it all the time when I go out now because I'm going to stand with the president on this. And it's just the looks you get are just priceless. To allow somebody to torque you, and get you all wound up just because he's wearing a hat, it's worth it. And
yes,
well, I figured it's good for Tennessee. I'm going to wear it on the airplane, and I'm going to wear it on the subway and the bus and the train up to New York. So that's going to be the way it works, I mean, let's see what happens. I'll let you know if I get arrested.
Yes, please do. Please do.
I always thought that, what the police should do is they should have people walk around with MAGA hats, and if people attack them or beat them up, they should be arrested for a political hate crime. I mean, just because you're wearing a MAGA hat doesn't mean...
Joe, gotta let you go. Gotta
okay.
Commercials. We'll be right back after these. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, apparently up in Pennsylvania, a Democratic state representative, Johnson Harrell, has been charged with theft and perjury and has resigned in disgrace. And I mention this not to specifically embarrass Representative Johnson Harrell, but to point out that we do seem to have a problem with the wrong sorts of people running for political office. And it may be because, political office, first of all, political power, the curse is it attracts people who should never be allowed to have it, because they want it for self-aggrandizement, for self-enrichment. I mean, look at how many stories we've seen about people who go to Congress and they're practically broke, and by the time their congressional career is over, they're multi-millionaires. And probably that is what makes it worthwhile to them, put up with all the nonsense in Washington, D.C. And maybe people who genuinely want to help the country know better than to get into that mess. There's a lot of people out here who want to make this world a better place, want to leave to the next generation a better society than was left to us, and understand working from outside the system is probably going to be much more effective than trying to build from within the system. Because you get inside that system, by and large, it seems to swallow people up. And even those who get elected with the best of intentions, the corruption catches up with them. Anyway, apparently new leaks have provided even more evidence that the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons suppressed and altered findings on their report on the Duma chemical attack. Now had two sets of whistleblowers, and now we're getting leaked documents basically saying that OPCW was given the assignment of framing Bashar al-Assad for what happened at Duma. So WikiLeaks is out there with a whole new bunch of leaked documents saying that no, in point of fact, these chemical weapons canisters weren't dropped from the air. They were placed on the ground by hand. There were people who were actually part of the OPCW inspectors who just said, look, they're changing everything. They're lying in the report. Now, a lot of people are looking at the U.S. most recent interactions with Iran, not with the increased sanctions and the tariffs and the chest thumping and everything, but apparently there was a high-level exchange of prisoners took place in Switzerland, and basically the U.S. said they're ready to resume negotiations with Iran on the removal of sanctions with no preconditions, and Iran made it equally clear it saw the prisoner exchange as the road to re-engaging in the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action nuclear deal without the removal of sanctions by the U.S. long required beforehand. So everybody's trying to make a little bit of move, and it looks like basically Trump is going to back off on his having just unilaterally left the P5+1 deal. Apparently is now starting to make efforts to say, well, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea, and let's just go for it. Meanwhile, of course, at this point, it's obvious that the Duma chemical attack narrative has collapsed. It was just another government lie to get you to go along with a war of aggression. And I don't know about you, but I've reached the point where I'm sick of being lied to. I don't want to have a government that lies to me about everything. I don't want to have a corporate media that lies to me about everything except the weather and the sports scores, and they're not even all that good about the weather, let's be honest. Better no government at all than a government that rules us with lies, fraud, and deception. And I think it's time for people to get very angry about being lied to, because when you're being lied to, you're not being treated with the respect you deserve as a citizen of this country. You're being treated by the government as if you're a fool and a naive idiot, that they can just feel they can get away with this over and over and over again. I think it's time for people to start getting angry, and every time another one of these government lies is revealed, you got to make noise about it. You got to get up there and shout, "Fire the liars." Because we keep seeing this over and over again, where those who come up with these lies, they get to keep their jobs. The ones who are trying to point out, hey, these people are lying, they're the ones who get fired. And that is fundamentally wrong. It's certainly not what this country was supposed to be. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say the government is authorized to lie to the American people, trick us out of our obedience and our money. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go back into what's going on in Syria, I got an email where somebody is basically admiring Joe for wanting to wear his MAGA hat, but in going to New York, he may hope for lip service, but be prepared for some violence. And they include a link to this story where police are looking for a mob that beat this man over Trump support. Liberals are getting very violent. It's real brown shirt stuff out there, so you need to be very, very careful. And, you know, when Trump first came along back in 2016, I thought about getting a MAGA hat. And I didn't get around to it. Where I live now, I don't think it'd be a problem if I wore one, but I'd certainly want the one with the earmuffs that come on down because it's getting cold. Alrighty, getting on back to what's going on in Syria. Russia is training a new militia in Hsbc. So apparently Russia has started creating a local force that will operate in northeastern Syria areas abandoned by the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces. Now, according to reports, the Russian military will train and equip a new pro-government militia in the province of Hsbc. The militia will be deployed at former positions of the SDF, which have not been taken by the Syrian army. So everybody's gearing up there. And Russia, I think, has come to understand that his claims to the contrary notwithstanding, that Donald Trump has no intention of actually pulling our troops out of Syria. It sounded good when he got out there on TV and said it. Yes, we're going to bring home all of our troops from Syria. No reason for them to be there. Then we find out they've only been slightly relocated. And he said, well, we're going to leave them in there for the oil. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. I like oil. And we can't let Assad use the oil inside Syria because he'll just do bad things with the money. And we'll take the oil and we'll sell it. And we'll do good things with the money, like buy more bombs and weapons in order to steal other countries' oil. And because that's the way it's supposed to be here. All right, we talked about this on Friday, but I'm going to mention it again. Israel, for the second year in a row, is barring Gaza's Christians from visiting the holy sites during Christmas. And apparently last Thursday, a spokesperson for the Israeli Military Liaison Office said Palestinian Christians residing in Gaza could obtain permission to travel abroad, but that none of them would be allowed to enter Israel and the West Bank, where many sites sacred to Christians are located. You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. What can I tell you? Alrighty, so up in Europe, more and more companies are starting to pull away from involvement with the Israeli apartheid. And apparently workers, mayors, and civil society groups are banding together in the Basque country to oppose the participation of the local firm CAF in a project to expand Israel's settlement railway in the occupied East Jerusalem. And the project contravenes international law since it solidifies Israel's grip on occupied Palestinian land. By participating, CAF is contributing to serious violations of Palestinian human rights. And apparently last August, a consortium of CAF and the Israeli infrastructure company Safir was chosen by Israel's finance ministry to expand the settlement railway project known as the Jerusalem Light Rail. And so CAF won the $2 billion contract to extend the railway to more illegal Israeli settlements, particularly in East Jerusalem, and to strengthen transportation links between those settlements and West Jerusalem. So they're setting up the light rail system. Basically, it's trying to basically create facts on the ground. Well, the story of Jeff Epstein just will not fade away, and probably it's a good idea that it doesn't. And apparently there's this story, and it came on out of Information Clearinghouse, that Jeff Epstein was recruited by Mossad, by Maxwell, to set up his little honey trap operation with the specific idea of ensnaring Bill Clinton. Because it was known back then how his appetites ran. He couldn't keep his hands to himself. And it caused major problems for the administration. It caused major problems certainly for Hillary, who set up the Bimbo Eruption Squad. It caused Bill Clinton no end of problems on the campaign trail. And CBS 60 Minutes had to basically butcher the interview of Jennifer Flowers in order to discredit her and help Bill Clinton get to that nomination. So they're basically saying that because Bill Clinton's insatiable appetite was known at the time, that Epstein was hired to basically set up this facade of, hey, I'm just another party guy, and I got some really cute chicks hanging around here who like to touch presidential junk. And it took off. It was a roaring success. It was apparently part of the mega spy scandal, and Epstein just started expanding it, snaring as many politicians and world leaders and Prince Andrew and all of that. And all I can say about all these people who fell into Epstein's trap is, you guys got to be idiots. That you went into his ranch, his home, his Caribbean island, and you indulged in sex with underage girls, and how could you not understand the place was wired with video and microphones? How could you not get that? Sometimes you wonder about the people who are either born into royalty or run for elected office, and they're not the best and the brightest. In fact, sometimes they come across as real idiots. They're really good at, combing their hair and looking good and presenting well. Okay, but the reality is they really don't think. They sort of let their handlers lead them around. In this case, the handlers weren't available. I mean, it's not like Epstein's reputation wasn't already known all over the place. It's kind of like Harvey Weinstein. And you just know that if you don't want to get tangled up in that stuff, you don't go to those parties at those locations. Anyway, now Turkey is starting to get very, shall we say, upset over all the sanctions and threats that are coming from the United States regarding Turkey's purchase of the Russian S-400 missile system. And the U.S. is now saying, well, if you're going to buy the S-400, we're going to refuse to sell you the F-35. And Turkey is apparently taking the attitude of, keep the F-35, it's a piece of junk. We're looking at the Russian Sukhois. And so, in typical blustering, bluffing U.S. fashion, Trump has come on back and said, well, we're just going to hit you with sanctions so that you can't pay for any of this Russian hardware. And Turkey is now basically getting ready to tell NATO to go shove it, and they're going to start closing off all these military bases that Turkey has been allowing NATO and the U.S. to use, including Incirlik Air Base, where the U.S. stores nuclear weapons. Now, this is not an idle threat. Again, if you look at the map of the earth in that part of the world, Turkey's central location makes it strategically of immense importance. In fact, way back in the 60s, the U.S. was putting medium-range nuclear missiles in Turkey. This forced the Soviet Union to respond by putting similar missiles inside Cuba, which led to the Cuban Missile Crisis. And probably most of you who have heard of the Cuban Missile Crisis were unaware that it was the U.S. placement of nuclear missiles in Turkey that triggered off that whole thing. The way the Cuban Missile Crisis story is told, certainly in school, is, just without any provocation whatsoever, the Soviet Union just put all these nuclear missiles in Cuba, and Kennedy had to deal with it. And Kennedy did deal with it. He got Khrushchev to back down. It got really, really close to being a shooting war. And Kennedy and Khrushchev just reached an agreement that if the United States invaded Cuba again, Bay of Pigs version 2, the Soviet Union would just launch a nuclear war at that point. Kennedy said, I can live with that. Khrushchev went home, took the missiles off of Cuba. Everybody treated Kennedy like he was a hero, which in this particular case he was, but they really didn't know the inside aspects of the deal and what was really going on in the back channels. And it's a shame because they need to understand that, because it sets the context for what followed later, up to and including the assassination of John F. Kennedy himself. All right, down in Australia, there was this commando, Kevin Frost, who had gone public 3 years ago about his involvement in alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. And he was apparently found dead and declared a suicide. And they're just saying that Sergeant Kevin Frost is among hundreds of former and serving Defense Force personnel who've taken their own lives in the past 2 decades. I would be very surprised. This guy was described as fearless, proud, and witty. Doesn't sound suicidal to me. Apparently, the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, says his government will consider calling a royal commission next year to look into why so many veterans are committing suicide. Well, that's a good idea, but what you should be looking at is how many of these so-called suicides are actually murders made to look suicides, because it's very common. It's a very common way to murder somebody and get away with it, is make it look like it was suicide. They did that to Deborah Jean Palfrey, Rented Lips. They did it to Vince Foster. It's an extraordinarily common way of trying to get away with a murder. Oh, how terrible they can. Look, Jeff Epstein. Another example there. All right, Russia's getting ready to test a new missile that is described as striking like a meteorite. And they're going to have that test in just a couple of days. It's part of the new Avangard missile system with the hypersonic glide vehicle, and it will be deployed on schedule for the first time this month. This thing is actually going into active service. Now, Putin has previously claimed the nuclear-capable weapon strikes like a meteorite and is unstoppable by any current defense system. And it certainly sounds like it. Look at the speed maneuverability of that incoming hypersonic glide vehicle. Phalanx isn't going to stop it. Standard missile isn't going to stop it. And we're still well away from the realm where an optical laser can lock onto it and dwell onto it long enough to cause it any damage. So they're basically saying these will be going into the field by the end of the year. Meanwhile, over in Italy, there's this huge evacuation in the city of Brindisi. And apparently, construction workers found an unexploded British bomb near a local cinema. And this was a 500-pound bomb Britain's Royal Air Force dropped in the city in 1941. And over 60% of locals were affected by the evacuation, which turns out to be the largest since the war. And this is the second time they've discovered a bomb in just 1 month. That stuff is just all over the place. I remember when I was working in Milan, and again, this is back in the 80s, and there was one whole section of the city that was just a block was completely walled off. And my hosts explained that there was some unexploded munitions in there. that nobody wanted to go in and try and defuse them. They were just going to let this area sit until eventually these bombs went off on their own. And they'd reinforced the barricades as well as they could. That was basically it. There were parts of the city that you could not go into because of unexploited World War II munitions. All righty, over in France, the transportation strike is going on huge. It's being joined by the Yellow Vests. And right now, France is recording a 391-mile-long traffic jam. And tensions are mounting on both sides. So hopefully, we're not going to see a lot of people get hurt. All righty. Let's talk about the economic news now. Apparently, the Federal Reserve is planning on flooding the market with a gargantuan $500 billion with a B in liquidity to avoid a year-end repo crisis. Well, I'm sorry, but when you're having to pour that much money into the market to keep it from imploding, it's already in crisis mode. You're just trying to make things look good for the end of the year, finish out that Christmas shopping season. Hey, the economy's doing great. Just get down to that shopping mall, whip out that plastic, and max it all out, you know, buying all kinds of stuff. Anyway, a lot of people are still talking about this new treaty, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada treaty, and say, you know, what is it really? Well, it was supposed to be a replacement for the 1994 North American Free Trade Agreement, known as NAFTA. But it turns out that this version of it is moving us closer to a European Union-style union, and how this USMCA treaty basically erodes America's national sovereignty in favor of regional integration economics controlled by non-elected panels who have regional jurisdictions. In other words, this USMCA is saying that you, the United States of America, can't run your economy anymore. We're going to have these regional panels who are appointed. They're not elected, just like the European Union Commission is not elected. They're sort of self-declared. I think they're rushing to try and get this started here in this hemisphere, because the one they've already got in the EU is coming apart at the seams. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right to the phone to Steve in West Virginia. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I think your analysis on the USMCA is on the money. To me, it looks like it's Trump's version of what Bush tried to do with the North American Union. And to further expand, it looks to me like these guys have realized that they're trying to simultaneously, put globalism and a one-world government together all at once is not the way to do it. It's better to do it slowly and block up regions, and then you can combine everything together. You block up the regions first, and then you combine the regions. And because the American people and people in Europe and stuff just aren't going to put up with it all at one time. It's just a scam by Trump.
The downside to that, of course, is that the people in Europe now have ample experience with what to expect from this New World Order, globalization, open borders, and they're, of course, sharing that insight with the American people. And that's probably why this USMCA trade deal is meeting such popular opposition.
Yeah, but Mike, if you listen to all the Q people, all the people that are in favor of QAnon and all that stuff, they're all for this MCA. They think it's going to be great and stuff. but none of them have read it or know anything about it. They're just going by what Q tells them. So you're right. You're absolutely right. It's not good. The USMCA is not good at all.
Well, apparently, according to Nancy Pelosi, she is saying that she regrets losing her fight to remove a provision in the USMCA granting big tech companies expanded immunity in the United States, Mexico-Canada agreement. And basically what they're doing is the USMCA enshrines big tech's right to censor. And
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's legal immunity for these social media companies to basically block your channel or shadow ban you or anything else they feel like doing.
Has that been written into the bill?
Yeah, it's already in there. It's Article 19.17, and it's basically they copied it out of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And Nancy Pelosi is out there trying to say that she wanted that provision pulled out, but it got left in. So I don't know how sincere Pelosi is about it. Sorry?
Why is there no pushback? Why is there no pushback on it?
Well, Nancy Pelosi is claiming she was the pushback, but that it didn't succeed. Probably, I mean, first of all, have you heard anything about this on the corporate media? Have you seen it on TV?
No.
Anyway,
no, I've got one more question for you, too.
All right, then stay on the line. We're going to bring you back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're discussing the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement with Steve from West Virginia, and has been the case with so many of these recent treaties. There is more in there than meets the eye. And the big part of the problem is that corporate media is only out there talking about, well, this is going to open up trade, and it's going to help get rid of some of the tariffs and barriers to trade. And they don't talk about the other aspects of it, like basically immunizing social media corporations from censoring your communications.
Okay, Mike, I got a different question, and I want you to kind of just briefly explain the psychology of what I'm going to ask you. You've been around for a very long time. You've told us about the bankers, 9/11, multiple other things. Jeff Rentz has done the same thing. Various other people on the internet, alternative news, have done similar things. Yet this entity called QAnon comes along in the last 2 years, and you've got it's an anonymous person or anonymous entity, and people are willing to trust an anonymous thing more than they're willing to trust you and Jeff Rentz, who have a track record, verifiable identity. Can you explain that to me? How is that possible? How are so many people willing to trust this entity called QAnon?
You mean QAnon?
You know, when they don't trust
I think
or whatever his name is.
I think QAnon is a propaganda operation, and if you want to lure people along to follow QAnon and stop paying attention to Jeff Rentz and John Stadmiller and Michael Rivero and Ryan Dawson, then you have to create the illusion that this guy is incredibly popular on the internet. So I question the reality of all these individuals that we are being told have just slavishly said, yes, QAnon is it. And one of the reasons I've been suspicious is because ever since QAnon first started showing up, I have been deluged with emails saying, you got to read this guy, you've got to follow what he says, you've got to repeat what he says. And it just reeks of being a psychological operation.
Absolutely, but how can an anonymous person that you can't even identify, you don't even know if it's real, how can it be so popular?
I'm saying I don't think it's really that popular. I think the popularity is a manufactured illusion, as much of an illusion as QAnon themselves. Mm-hmm.
So in other words, these people that Annons or whatever they call themselves. You know, some of them have got 700,000 subscribers on their YouTube channels. Is that an illusion too, or I mean, do you think that's fake?
Look at what YouTube has been doing to people's channels over the last several years, where, you know, the number of subscribers and the number of upvotes you get are constantly being changed. The whole point of the USMCA treaty is that they can do whatever they want to the traffic going through their servers, and they can't be sued for it. So, yeah, if you're going to set up this supposedly anonymous individual to try and create a false trail for people to follow along, you have to create a false sense that people are listening to this individual. And I don't think they're really there. I think, you know, there's an operational group of propagandists who are out there trying to create the illusion that QAnon has this huge, huge following, but I don't think it's real. Because, first of all, this QAnon, a lot of what they're saying doesn't really make a lot of sense.
You know what? I actually think you're probably correct, because if you notice, a lot of these QAnon channels, they don't get any strikes against them, and they're not being taken down. It's all the other people like yourself. But the QAnon channels are not being taken down. They don't get any strikes. There's like 3 real popular ones, and you don't hear anything about any strikes or being taken down. So I think you're 100% right. I think it's all a big scam, and the people that are watching this stuff are just zombies.
Well, I don't know that many people are watching this stuff. Okay, well, thank you very much, Steve. We're going to let you go and switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Mike, he pretty much spells it out. I mean, all these fools that think that Trump is the man, you know, that he's doing, you know, that he's really for the people, and it's all this other nonsense, anti-globalist. There's a lie to it. Now, you know, I know the fake news network, I'm talking to this time, Fox, is really pushing this agreement, and a lot of the corporate talk show hosts are trying to push this garbage. And it figures, because they're globalists, and they want it. They don't care about the working people in this country. And I just want to say, too, I know that you get a few callers that are really trumpets, you know, on your station. One guy in particular, I won't mention his name, I think he's from Florida or something, and he keeps on peddling this garbage about Trump. But I'm telling you, this man is no good. He's no better than what he's made. If he's slightly better than some of the Democrats, fine, but it's not by much. He really doesn't care about the people. He cares about his corporate buddies. These big tech companies, the ones that are trying to stifle free speech, now they're going to be even more powerful. There's, you know, I just don't, you know, what else can I say? I mean, these people are brainwashed. They're fools. And like you said, this QAnon stuff, you know, in the very beginning, I thought there was something to it. Then I started to realize this is some kind of a psyop, you know?
Yep.
And, you know, pure garbage. And now we're finding out. I mean, you know, and yet people are still, oh, Trump's this. Now, look, I'm not for impeachment on this case because this is garbage with what's happening there with Ukraine. If anything, if he should be impeached, it's because he gave these neo-Nazi militias weapons at all. Okay? Never should have given them the weapons. It's not only dangerous to have neo-Nazis running around with these type of weapons, but on top of it, provoking Russia. Provoke nuclear war. So, I mean, if he's going to be impeached, it should be on stuff like that or what he's doing in Syria. Not for, you know, not for looking at corruption that has to do with both the Democrats and the Republicans. Another reason I don't think they're even going to go to a full trial on this, because they know Lindsey Graham posed with these Nazis back in 2014. Him and McCain both. Just as they posed with Islamist terrorists back in the Middle East. Who are they kidding? So they don't want this stuff really investigated. They will probably just shove it aside, go through the motions, and acquit, acquit Trump of whatever they're charging him with on this. Because, like I said, they cannot afford to have a full-blown trial. It is going to bring down this whole corrupt government. Both of these corrupt parties will fall if it really comes out. These are warmongers. Whole thing's about hating Russia. People got to stop being confused by these talk show hosts like Levin, Hannity, Limbaugh. Beck. These are nothing but corporate talk show hosts. They're mouth for the corporations, as is on the other side Rachel Maddow, or Mad Cow as I call her.
Yes.
That's all these people are, Mike. That's all they are. Real talk is people like you, Alex Jones to a degree, though I wish he'd stop shilling for this clown, Trump. But he does say some good stuff at the same time that you won't hear on regular corporate talk. People like you said, Ryan Dawson, who they're trying to do everything they can to stifle. Adam Green, who I'm respecting. He's not always on a. He's sometimes he's hung up on silly things like these kabads. I don't think these kabads have all that much power. I think Zionists as a whole, but kabads are basically a bunch of cults running around there, with the beards and stuff like that. But he's right on a lot of other stuff. So, and the same thing with Ryan Christian, who's the I don't know if you know who he is, the Last American Vagabond.
Yes.
Excellent. The guy is really on target. Okay, these are the real people who stand up for this country. These are the real patriots who stand up for the United States and its people. Okay, corporate talk does not stand up. They stand up for nobody but the corporations that fund them. The fake news network is really no better than the crap news network, or the nothing but crap news network. They're all bad. Just different sides of the coin. All they are.
Yes.
And this shows it. If this doesn't show it, what you just pointed out about this new disagreement, then I don't know what this. I mean, this is as bad as it gets. I didn't realize it was that bad, Mike. I'm glad you pointed it out. One thing I haven't been following that much. I thought, probably that's kind of this may be an improvement for NAFTA. It sounds to me now like it's NAFTA and steroids.
Yes.
And that's all I got to say, Mike. I wish people would learn and stop. And you trumpet, if you really care about this country, stop shilling for this guy. He's no good. He's not doing this country any good. He's a fake. At the very least, he's too stupid to run the country. At the worst, he's part of the problem as it is. He's part of these people in the first place. And I'm beginning to believe more and more, especially with something like this, that he's part of it from the beginning. All right? So that's all I got to say, Mike. Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call, Mark. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network, and go right back to the phones to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, Michael. Aloha. And there you go again with this last caller, Mark. Yeah, the guy wants to single out Trump. Why doesn't he call James Kelso's show tonight? I want to listen in. I want him to put down Trump on Kelso's show. That'd be really good entertainment. This guy, Mark, why doesn't he call Kelso and tell him how crazy Trump is and what Trump hasn't done? This guy, there he goes again, spewing his nonsense. Trump is not no Teddy Roosevelt. Trump is maybe no George Washington for that matter or whatever. But you know what? He's done something a little bit better than most of the. Well, who does this guy want? Mark, who do you want? You want Bernie Sanders? You want? I think he really wants Bloomberg.
No, Tom,
I think that's what
Tom, what we all want, was the Donald Trump that we voted for back in 2016, the one who was going to drain the swamp. He was going to clean up the election system. He was going to work for vaccine safety. He was going to put Hillary and the deep state in prison. And he hasn't delivered on any of that. We've got, maybe 60 miles of wall built so far, a tax cut that benefited the already wealthy. And the other thing that he campaigned on, he wanted to end all of these military interventions. Well, we're still militarily engaged in all these countries, and Trump basically was lying about that to the same extent that Obama was back in 2008. He was out there campaigning and saying, when I'm elected president, the very first thing I'm going to do is end these wars and bring our boys home. You can take that to the bank.
Well, Michael, I told you that Donald Trump is not perfect, and he's not going to ever be a perfect president. He's not even going to be half a perfect president, but he's better than the alternative that we have out there right now. I understand that Donald Trump hasn't done a lot of things that he's promised and he's going to do, but he has done some things that he has done that we would have never heard if Hillary had got in there, and that's why you were going against Hillary, Michael. So I understand that. I totally am in agreement with you, and I'm in agreement with you, the last caller. But I got to say this, and you're talking. Look, Comey was on yesterday's TV admitting that the FISA was abusive, and he was a liar. But has he been arrested? No. So I mean, I don't know what Trump can do about Comey. I know he said the guy should be in jail for 10 years for what he's done with FISA. I know that. I want to ask you, this guy Robert Mendez, the guy in Jersey, the senator there, was he on the Lolita with Epstein? Was that guy flying over to that island? I'd like to find out how many Democrats compared to Republicans were going to Jeffrey Epstein's island, and what he has on all these between Democrats and Republicans. This guy Epstein, what does he have on the different parties?
I would love to know that information as well, but we do know that the island has been scrubbed. The computers were all taken away. The big question is who got that treasure trove of blackmail information. Was it Mossad? Was it CIA? Was it the Democrats? We don't really know. And it would be good to know. I think all these people should be outed because once they've been outed, they can't be controlled anymore.
Well, Michael, there's a detective here in South Florida who's got the black book. There is a detective here in South Florida area who's got the book. Supposedly he was a detective for, I don't know if he worked for Broward County or Dade. I think it was one of the counties here. And he has the book. And the FBI supposedly got it. I don't know what he's doing. I guess he's scared, or I don't know what's going on with that situation. But I will say this. I was watching the news today again. And before I go into immigration with you real quickly, I will say this. That Comey and somebody, when the Durham report comes out, somebody's got to get arrested because the public's going to be in an uproar. It's going to absolutely go insane if somebody doesn't get arrested for all this collusion and nonsense. Okay? They were talking today on Breitbart, Michael, about all these Brazilians coming to the southern border. Have you heard about that? And none of them are actually being inoculated. That's another thing that we haven't been talking about. The inoculation of these people coming here, Michael, how they're going to take this country down is through diseases. That's what they say, the American Indian got wiped out.
Tom, you have to look at the reality that these vaccines may actually be causing more disease than they prevent. And I say that because, we're opening up this huge debate about how there are all these measles outbreaks, but they all seem to be taking place inside populations that have already had the vaccination. And we know they had that same problem with the oral polio vaccine, where instead of preventing the polio, it was actually causing the illness. Because, with the vaccine companies indemnified against all civil harm and the taxpayers picking up the damages through the vaccine courts, these pharmaceutical companies, they can just put whatever they want in those bottles and put it on out there. So this automatic saying, well, they're unvaccinated, therefore they're dangerous, maybe not. We know people who get that flu vaccine every year and they come down with the flu inevitably. Then you have all these other people who refuse to get the flu vaccine and they've never had the flu. Okay, there is something that is not working correctly with that whole product line, and I think we need to sort that out before we start arbitrarily using whether or not they've been vaccinated or not as some kind of a judge of character.
Well, that I agree with you, Michael. I mean, you pointed that out to me. You probably are correct on that. I don't know. Maybe that's why there are all these flu season going to be a hard hit. This time of year is going to be really. I mean, with this year they're going to say a real big heavy season is going to hit the flu. I don't know. Going back to something I also want to bring up that's been on the news, there's been a few things on Breitbart that are 70,000 anchor babies, Michael, are being born every year in the country. That was on Breitbart Newsmax. 70,000.
Yes, I saw that.
Okay, you saw that. Did you also see about the kid? Did you see about the kid in Florida who had their Make America Great hat on? He got his butt beat on the school bus, and he had the video of it. I want to ask you this. If that was a Jewish boy with a little yarmulke that said, Make America Great, like the little yarmulke, and he was Jewish, how many stations, alphabet stations, would be running that on the network right now?
Oh, they'd all be running it now. They'd all be running it now to support this, campaign against anti-Semitism.
That's right. They sure would. They'd be all over on every major network, ABC, NBC, CBS. They'd be running it 24/7 about this poor little Jewish kid with a yarmulke has to make America great. Got his butt beat by all these punks on these buses. And also, speaking of that, Michael, let me ask you this: as far as that goes, we know who controls the media basically in this country. Okay, a kid gets his butt beat, and you never hear any more you don't hear too much more about Jesse Smollett case anymore. That's kind of been, you don't even hear about that anymore.
No, you
I don't know what's going on with that. With he sent a letter with supposedly the powder in it. Nothing's happening. You don't hear nothing in the media about that, about Smollett anymore, which is a joke in itself. If that would have been a reverse, that would have been nuts. But here's a real story I want to ask you, Michael. We've been hearing these Democrats talking about Trump and impeachment, all this. Let's get to this real story here. Why hasn't one Republican, why hasn't anybody in the Republican Party, Senate or Congress, in the House, say, listen, I want to see the picture of Barry Soetoro, Al Green, Mad Maxine Waters, the other guy, I can't remember the other guy that was in Minnesota. I can't think of his name right now. I'll figure it in a minute. And Jeremiah Wright, when he had the picture, they were all hugging each other with Louis Farrakhan. How come they don't bring that up on
Okay, well, Tom, we're going to have to let you. We're going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials here, and we'll be back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And, of course, we've got our holiday bump music in the rotation right now. And these are all clips from Claire's album, Christmas Without Borders, which is available on Amazon. Plug. So let's go back to the phones here to Don in Arizona. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I saw you have on your website there, you have an article about TSA groping some old lady.
Yes.
Feeling her breast and so forth. The thing about it is, I had a personal experience. They're horrible. TSA is horrible, and they're obnoxious. I mean, the whole thing is stupid, but also they don't even do what they're supposed to. I'll give you an example. I got a little thing of pepper spray that it hooks onto your keychain.
Yes.
And accidentally, I left it on my keychain. I forgot about it with that pepper spray, and I just said, well, because there's so many damn things you have to remember. What can you take? Well, I forgot about the pepper spray. But I had it in my carry-on bag. I flew all the way from Arizona to the Philippines and back to Arizona. And at one point, so they're supposed to see that. It goes through an X-ray. They're supposed to see that and take it away from me or something. And one guy actually looked at it. One of the TSA guys actually opened my bag and looked at it, and he just didn't say anything. He just left it. So they let me have my pepper spray. That's a weapon. Somebody, if you had a whole bunch of guys, a few guys with pepper spray, that's you can kill somebody with that, I guess, or you definitely could disable people.
You can seriously incapacitate them, and sometimes you have to wonder.
That just goes to show you. There's been several. I know there's been people that have just for the hell of it, they've shown that the TSA is ineffective, and I think some people have gone on planes with guns or with something that looks like a gun and got away with it. So, and talking about these different presidents, TSA was George W. Bush, and out of all the presidents, I gotta say he was by far the worst president. He invaded Iraq and lost the war. It'd be different if he won, but he went in there and just totally humiliated America, and started the TSA. It's supposed to be Republican small government. No, he started a whole new agency, the TSA. Started this whole routine of treating everybody like a criminal just for trying to fly an airplane, taking away your Fourth Amendment. They can do that because it's private. But
well, actually, to be perfectly accurate, No, most people don't understand. The TSA is not a chartered law enforcement organization. They don't actually have any authority to detain or arrest you. All they can do, if they think you're in violation of the law, they have to call the real police to come on over and investigate. And unfortunately, we've had way too many incidents of TSA greatly exceeding their allowed authority, and of course this constant groping of people is part of it. Yeah, these are people who a week before couldn't get a job at a fast food burger joint, and then all of a sudden they get a badge and a uniform. Well, it's not even a badge, it's just an ID tag. And they're walking around the airport just just with the thrill of their imagined authority, and it really goes to their head very, very quickly. The Department of Homeland Security is constantly testing TSA, and TSA is constantly failing to come up.
All right. Well, that's another one that Bush started too. Homeland Security Department. That was not there beforehand. So I mean. The whole thing with Bush, but now you're talking about all these people that say they don't like Trump. Okay, but who are you going to vote for? That's what I'd like to know. Not vote at all? You got a choice of Trump or can't even admit. None of the Democratic candidates, except for Tulsi has no chance at all. So none of them are even plausible. I mean, Elizabeth Warren, they had the worst crop this time I've ever seen. So you can either vote for Trump or you can say, okay, hell with that, I will not vote. But I got to go with the Trump was going to be better for the Second Amendment rights. And, okay, I'll let you go, Mike. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, this is another area in which I'm disappointed in Donald Trump. He was supposed to be this champion of the right to keep and bear arms. And so far we're getting a big yawn over this whole raft of Democrat-passed anti-gun laws in Virginia. That could actually spark into a major problem down there where you have sheriffs who are simply saying, we're going to deputize the entire population of the state, which would make them exempt from all these new gun laws. And apparently there's something like 70 counties that have already declared themselves Second Amendment sanctuaries. Because if the liberals can do it with the illegal immigrants, the conservatives can do it for law-abiding firearms owners. And so if we're going to have a new civil war in this country, it looks like Virginia is the place where it may break out. All right, getting on. Oh, time for us to have another commercial break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, I got a couple questions for you. Actually, I got one story, a TSA story for you that, and I did not do this purposefully, but it made it through. It's made it through a couple times because I forgot about it. I've got a little key that has an actual knife inside of it, and you can get them at Harbor Freight Tools. And I've got one on my keychain because I'm open packages and letters, this and that. And I didn't think much about it, so you fold the knife back inside the key there, and it looks like a regular key. It goes through scanners, and I've never had a problem. It's never been caught, but I did notice it myself, and I wasn't trying to fool anybody. But, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, if you look at a CIA manual, if you could ever get your hand on one, how to kill people, well, you can kill them with a knitting needle. You can kill them with a sharp pencil, a pen. I mean, we've seen enough James Bond movies how to that stuff is not just make-believe, it's real stuff. But, it's just that they really don't catch much of anything. They haven't done anything. They haven't caught any terrorists. They haven't done anything. So it's just a huge drain and resource of our tax dollars for nothing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and they're kind of a laughing stock. I mean, the number of stories about TSA, obviously focusing on the very attractive passengers and travelers to the exclusion of everybody else. And let's see, call declined here. Okay, so anyway,
got a couple other questions. I got an economics question for you.
Sure.
Yeah, you mentioned $500 billion being infused into the economy, majorly to keep the markets afloat. Well, that's going to increase the money supply, which is going to increase inflation. I assume they're going to have to destroy a lot of money to offset the increase, the surplus of money in the economy. How else could they do it other than to destroy? Pardon?
They're going to need a cash sink.
Okay. And what would that be?
Well, more war.
Okay. Okay.
More money spent on illegal immigrants.
Okay, got it. Last question I've got to you. This Democrat that wants to switch parties or says he's going to switch parties because he's not on board with the impeachment. If you're voted in, you're elected, and you're a Democrat, can you just, I mean, what's the legal aspect? How do you go about saying, you know, I'm in, I've got 2 more years on my term, and I'm now, I mean, because if you switch parties in the middle, don't you disenfranchise the people who voted for you? I mean, how do you do this switch over?
Well, I don't know that there's a formal process, but this is not the first time that we've had elected representatives say, I'm really tired of the philosophy of the party I've been a part of, you know, I really want to be part of the other party.
Well, I understand it. I would just think maybe you'd have to fulfill your obligation in the party until you're up for re-election, then you change parties there. But I was just curious if you had any idea how you can possibly switch parties in the middle of your term when your voters voted for you, you know, they'd be disenfranchised, to saying, well, now you turned on us, now who's going to represent us? It's just an interesting possibility. I mean, how is this possible? How's it done? Just curious.
Yeah, well, I don't know the inner workings on that at all. So.
Okay. Well, I got something to research. I'll see if I can figure out and let you know then.
Okay.
Have a good show, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot here. And sorry to be distracted, but, you know, the pharmacy's calling me, and we've told them between 3 and 6 p.m. local time, cannot answer the phone. So I have a feeling because they didn't leave a message, it was probably an automated system, that something needs to be picked up. All right, getting on back here to the economic news. And by the way, the phone lines are completely open here. 800-313-9443. The deficit has spiked 12% in the first 2 months of the current fiscal year. That's a lot. That is an awful lot. Now, 60% of big U.S. corporations say a headcount reduction is coming in 2020. It's kind of a polite way of saying they're going to have to lay people off. And we already know that as we get to January, February, there are going to be a lot of layoffs, especially from the retail sector, because they've hired up for the holiday shopping, not as much as we'd like. Those people are all going to get let go in January and February. You know, everybody sort of gets this economic fever during Christmas shopping season, but it always wears off. And, you know, all the money that was poured in to the economy to inflate the economy and make things look good, that all has to come on back out at some point. Stephen was pointing out there. So this be of good cheer, it's really kind of an illusion. Think about it. It's feeling good now, and, you know, let's have a big party on New Year's, which we're certainly going to do around here because we're allowed to have fireworks in Indiana. But then as we get into the beginning of next year, things are going to get really, really tight. I think next year is going to be the year when most Americans really feel how bad the economy has become. And, of course, the Democrats are going to love that, because they're going to blame the GOP and Trump and say, well, look, when Obama left office, the economy was in really good shape. And gosh darn that, Trump and the GOP, they just ruined everything. Because that's how politicians operate. They'll take credit for anything good that happens, even if they had nothing to do with it. And anything bad that happens, it's always the fault of the opposition party. Anyway, a little bit of good news for students. The University of Phoenix is going to cancel $141 million in student debt. And apparently, they're actually paying $50 million in cash. They're canceling $141 million student debt to settle allegations of deceptive advertising brought by the Federal Trade Commission. Where I know where the FTC is coming on this one, because we've all been through it, everybody who went to college. You get lured into college with this promise that a college degree, any college degree, art history major, Sanskrit, will result in a higher paying job that will allow you to pay back those student loans in a very short interval of time. And it just doesn't work that way. And that's why so many college graduates with completely useless degrees, like art history major, they're still living with their family because every penny that they make is going to make payments on that student debt. Now, I was very fortunate in that I was able to work my way through college. I didn't have to take out a student loan. My nephew was very fortunate in that my younger brother really went on a limb and worked very, very hard so that he didn't have to take out a student loan. But there's been a dearth of financial support for college education, unless you're an illegal immigrant. Then there's all kinds of, stuff out there. But for normal, legal American kids trying to go to college, scholarships are gone, the support is gone, and all that's left out there is just this mechanism for grabbing you and jamming you onto that debt hook with the big barb on the end, just get you on there as good and hard as they can. And you go through school and you spend the money and you graduate with a degree that probably is of no use whatsoever, because even the high-tech jobs have mostly gone overseas. They're filled by the H-1B visa workers. And so these kids are stuck. And so, yeah, they have been made promises that the university and student loan system can't fulfill. All righty. We're hearing all kinds of talk about the new Chinese trade deal. And it goes back and forth and back and forth. And last week, Trump was saying, well, there's going to be a new trade deal. China's going to guarantee to buy a whole bunch of our agricultural products. And, that's the deal. And then China came back and said, no, that's not what we agreed to. You agreed that you were going to cut the tariffs. Well, Trump is now saying, well, we'll cut the existing tariffs by 50% in exchange for the pledges. And the stock market was kind of bouncing around because apparently not everybody's really certain what is actually being said. So now China says that the U.S. and China won't impose newly planned tariffs. In fact, this was supposed to happen just yesterday. But the existing tariffs remain. And I think, again, it's a bad way to be doing business. It's a bad, bad way to be doing business. China has ordered all of its government offices and public institutions to remove American-made computers amid trade negotiations between the two countries failing to progress. And the aim of the move is reported to increase China's reliance on homemade technologies, but this is likely to hit U.S. companies such as Hewlett-Packard, Dell, and Microsoft hard. Talking about $150 billion a year in revenues from China. There's another aspect to it this article doesn't mention. China may realize that by using American-made computers that they're basically wide open to corporate espionage. So all these machines are backdoored. And they're not just going to spy on the American people, they're going to spy on anybody they see an advantage to. Okay, over at the Vatican. Boy, the Vatican is in problems again. And apparently they've had a huge budget shortfall after paying over $3 billion in pedophile priest settlements around the world. So apparently there is this charity donation program called Peter's Pence, if you will, and apparently the Catholic Church has been dipping into that fund to the tune of over $50 million annually to plug holes in their out-of-control budget. In other words, a classic case of false advertising. The people going into these Catholic churches are being encouraged to throw money into this particular collection plate, saying that this is going to go help the poor. And according to the Wall Street Journal, only 10% of that money that's being donated to support the poor actually goes to support the poor. The rest of it is being used to catch these budget shortfalls because these priests cannot keep their little flies zipped here. Okay, Volkswagen is storing around 300,000 diesel vehicles at 37 facilities around the United States. And Volkswagen AG has paid more than $7.4 billion to buy back these 350,000 US diesel vehicles through mid-February. And the German automaker has been storing hundreds of thousands of vehicles around the United States for months. Volkswagen has 37 secure storage facilities around the U.S. housing all these vehicles, and the lots include a shuttered suburban Detroit football stadium, a former Minnesota paper mill, and a sun-bleached desert graveyard near Victorville, California. So, now this all had to do with the fact that Volkswagen was caught fudging the software on their cars, so that when it was in the setup to measure mileage, the engine would perform a certain way. And when the computer determined that you were actually out there driving, the engine would be reconfigured to get more bang for your buck. It was kind of a cheat. On the other hand, you know, there's 300,000 cars out there that I'm sure could be put to some use, you know, even by people who are basically willing to say, okay, I'm going to wind up paying a little bit more for the diesel fuel. But, you know, still, it's a deal for the car. I mean, if you look at how much waste is involved out there, 300,000 cars just sitting out there. Of course, I understand one of the reasons they don't want to put those on the market's already glutted. I mean, we're at the end of the current model year. They're already out there trying to sell the 2020 versions. And boy, if you actually have a steady income, boy, is it a great time to buy a car. Because the prices are just absolutely amazing. So let's see. Alrighty. Hsbc's Swiss unit has agreed to pay $192 million in the latest U.S. tax evasion deal. So the Swiss private banking unit of Hsbc Holdings will pay this $192.4 million to resolve a U.S. probe of its role in helping wealthy Americans evade taxes by using undeclared Swiss bank accounts. So the rich out there get richer by dumping the tax burden on ordinary Americans. Now, you probably heard last week about this very bizarre so-called piece of artwork, which was a banana duct taped to the wall, and it supposedly was appraised at and sold for some huge amount of money. It turns out that modern art is just another way to evade taxes, because this ultra-rich person will hire an artist and say, just paint me something that looks bizarre, for which they'll get paid a few $1,000s. Then the rich person takes this canvas, turns it around to a, how shall we put this delicately, a friendly appraiser who says, oh, this thing is worth $20 million at least. So the rich person then turns around and donates this piece of modern art, which has been declared worth $20 million, to a local art gallery or museum and gets the $20 million write-off on their taxes. So if you ever wondered why so much modern art just seems like overpriced junk, that's why. It's just another scam. It's another way for the rich people to hang on to their money and stick you with the burden of paying for the wars and paying for Israel and so forth. All righty. Bill Holter is a financial writer, precious metals expert, is saying, in response to the question, is a default in the gold market coming soon? He's saying it's already happened. More about this when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And so we're talking about Bill Holter. He is a precious metals expert, and he's responding to the question, is a default in the gold market coming soon? And Bill Holter says it's already happening. They can't deliver. Just in December alone, there are supposed to be 41 tons of gold to be delivered. COMEX only has 37 tons to deliver on. And the 37 tons will not be eaten into to deliver. And he's asking, are they paying a 25% premium to settle in cash? We know that's been going on. They've over-leveraged the paper gold in order to keep the price of physical gold down, and now it's catching up with them. And mines just can't keep up with it. He's saying it's time to start suing the COMEX to get to the bottom of what's going on. Because when you sign a commodity contract, you are expecting to receive that commodity at this future point in time. That's the way it's supposed to work. And then you get down to that future point in time and they come out and they say, well, you know, we don't actually have the commodity in question. So we're going to give you its cash equivalent plus 25% additional for vigorish, if you will. At which point, I think a lot of people would sue, but if that cash bonus, that uplift, is generous enough, they're just going to say, well, okay, yeah, I'm still making money on the deal. Now, somebody's getting the short end of that stick to come up with all that extra cash. But this is a very, very reckless way to be dealing with the commodities market. And I'm not just talking about gold. This affects the platinum market, the copper market, the silver market. You can't play reckless games with the commodities market without ultimately destroying the public trust in the commodities market. Now, 17% of the U.S. gross domestic product, is running at 20.2% inflation. And yet, what do we hear from the corporate media? There is no inflation. Just trust us, there is no inflation. Mahi dictum est. Getting on to immigration and refugees here. Apparently, a Clinton-appointed judge in El Paso, Texas, has permanently blocked billions of dollars in military funding from being spent on building the southern border wall. Judge David Briones, a judge on the Western Texas Federal District Court, ruled in favor of El Paso County and Border Network for Human Rights. So they're still fighting tooth and nail. They want those borders open. They want the illegals flooding on in because the illegals will vote Democratic and shift next year's election. We got to take a break here for station identification. Got a caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. We're going to go right back to the phones here to Paul in New Jersey. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, for all these people and the Trump fan club out there expecting justice out of Donald Trump, you got to be kidding yourself. I mean, he appointed Bill Barr. If you look at Bill Barr and his past, he is a dirty ex-CIA deep stater of the worst sort. You know, he was in on BCCI, Iran-Contra. I think he helped write the moral justification for George Bush Sr. to invade Panama. He really is a dirty, dirty man.
Yes.
Now, do you really expect him to arrest Ghislaine Maxwell? You know, Epstein died under Barr's watch. You know, after all, he runs the federal prisons. The Department of Justice does. Do you really think? Now, where's the, you know, is he working with Interpol right now to find Ghislaine Maxwell and extradite her to the United States to interrogate her? Is that happening out there, fellas? Hey, all you Trump fans out there, what's Trump doing about that?
Well, Ghislaine is apparently down in Brazil, and there is an effort to extradite her, but it's being fought out through the courts right now.
And we should also remember, Jeffrey Epstein, he met that Virginia, what's her name, Gwiff, one of the Epstein's girls. He met her right at Mar-a-Lago. The girl used to work for Donald Trump. So, it happened right under Donald Trump's nose, taking one of his employees like that, the blonde. So there's a lot of dirty shenanigans going on here. Now, another point is, another person to bring in concerning Epstein, because just because Epstein is dead doesn't mean you can't still hold an investigation. Isn't that right?
I agree. I absolutely agree.
So why not subpoena or bring Alan Dershowitz into court and have him, or into, the police station, to see what he has to say about what went on in Epstein Island or on the flights to Lolita Island on the Express. And Bill Barr could do that, right?
Yeah.
And I guess Donald Trump can maybe tell him to do it out on the golf course so nobody in the White House will hear him telling the Justice Department what to do. Like I've said, that's the way you're supposed to do it if you really wanted justice. And this is the charade of all this stuff. The hopes, the high hopes of all the Trump supporters, fellas. He's not going to throw Comey in jail. It's a fantasy. Nothing's going to happen. He didn't arrest or, bring Hillary to justice. He's not going to. He's not going to bring Strzok or McCabe or Horowitz or any of these guys who are the flavor of the day of corruption. None of them are going to be brought to justice. As a matter of fact, let's look to who has actually gone to jail. Michael Cohen.
Yes.
Right? Roger Stone. Paul Manafort. Right? Flynn might be going to jail. And that's it. So the lesson is, you work for Trump, you get a job for Trump, you might end up in jail. So why work for Trump? Let alone, like you were saying before I called, why even vote for Trump if the guy's not going to deliver? Right? When you read off part of the list, here's a little bit more of the list you missed. Trump's didn't promise to not run up the debt. He's run up the debt the same rate as Obama. Yep. He promised to do something to overturn Obamacare. There the Republicans had the majority. There they were for 2 years with a Republican president to lower the price of pharmaceuticals. They did nothing. They were there for 2 years. They could have, to make Mexico pay for the wall. They did nothing. And that's what I'm saying about it. Fellas, he's kicking you in your teeth. Donald Trump thinks you're a bunch of Gavones, you followers of Gavone, putting on your MAGA hats, wearing your MAGA hat. He's going to kick you in your teeth again. And you think after he kicks you in your teeth and you come back, can I have another one? You're going to earn his respect all of a sudden? Are you that naive to think that if you come back to vote for him or support him, you're going to somehow earn his respect? And that's what I'm not
interested. I'm not interested in Trump's respect here, and I wasn't even all that interested in his respect back in 2016. And the only way I'm going to support Trump next year is if Hillary steps back in, because she definitely would be the worst of two evils. But if Hillary decides to stay out of this race, then I'm just going to let politics take its course, and Trump can either sink or swim on his own merits.
That's right, because to him, he took us for granted. We're the guys who voted for him. He feels like, just look what he did for Israel this weekend. Or the weekend before last. It was incredible. You know the remarks? And if you give me a second, I got this line where he says, remember the quote, "We have to get the people of our country, of this country, to love Israel more. I have to tell you that. We have to do it. We've got to get them to love Israel more, unquote. That is what your president, this dual allegiance president, is saying in public.
Yes.
In front of that was the Israel American Council National Summit. He said 2 weeks ago on Saturday night when nobody's paying attention. And I'm supposed to be so enthusiastic about an American who's acting like a Mossad agent, because that's, to me, what the guy is. He's a Mossad agent. He gets in there, and, man, everything for the Israelis. There he is, hanging out, cavorting with Alan Dershowitz and that other pervert who owns the Patriots, right? Here he is. He's cavorting with those guys and saying, oh, you can't badmouth Israel in any campuses, or you're not going to get federal money. There's that really nationalistic defender of freedoms, Donald Trump.
Yep.
I mean, really, fellas, drop the Kool-Aid, stop the pretenses. He hasn't delivered to you. You're a sucker to him. You're not going to earn his respect walking around with a MAGA hat. You have to walk out. It's only when you're walking away with the votes where all of a sudden will a politician go back into pander mode and try to suck up to you and try to get your vote again and make more phony promises. But after he lied about the last 3 years ago and he lied about everything he said, why should we even trust him now? Forget the guy. Start shopping for a new candidate, fellas. There's other guys out there. Maybe this Jordan guy, right? He seems pretty good, Jim Jordan guy. I like that guy. And there might be other people. Maybe just write in David Duke as a protest vote. But just doing more of the same.
You're free to write me in.
Yeah. And doing more of the same is the definition of insanity. And so being on the Trump train and all the rest, bail on the Trump train. It's an Israeli train. It's the Mossad train. And it's really a takeover of this country. I've never seen anything like it. And let alone this whole play of the one group of Jewish representatives, like remember with the True News a few weeks ago. And they're going after this. Either way, it's a charade. It's a pantomime. I'm not buying into it. Just because a bunch of lowlifes attacked Trump doesn't make me want to defend Trump. Trump hasn't delivered. Where's the beef? Yes. Right? And until I get the beef, he better do a quick 180 on these policies. Let's see him veto a few bills. Maybe. Let's see him extend the wall maybe a little bit. A decent wall that can't be hopped over real easy. Maybe, but otherwise, no, Mr. Trump, you sold out your constituency. I'll take my vote elsewhere, all right? And I hope, and we need millions of us backstabbed Trump supporters back in 2016. We got to be vocal. We got to tell it to Mr. Trump. We got to tell it to other future candidates, right? And remind people a little more like George Washington, a lot less than David Ben-Gurion, all right? Because this is America, and we're real America firsters. We don't put Israel above American interests. We don't care about foreign countries. We don't want any attachments to other foreign countries. Our president is supposed to serve our interests and deliver to his constituency. And on that note, Donald Trump is a complete failure, people. Let's jump off the Trump train and start shopping for a new candidate. On that note, thank you, Michael.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call, Paul, and we're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. And getting on back to immigration, we were talking about how this judge on the Western Texas Federal District Court ruled in favor of El Paso County and Border Network for Human Rights, which is this pro-migration organization. And Briones argued that the president overstepped the mark with his declaration and put a permanent injunction on the use of the money, stopping around $3.6 billion in funding from going to the wall. Now, I hope Trump appeals that, simply because I think it's the judge who overstepped their authority. And again, one of my gripes about President Trump is he's never put on those presidential brass knuckles and gotten down to work. He has proved himself to be a weak, easily manipulated leader. And again, the only way I'll support him next year is if Hillary steps back in. If Hillary doesn't step back in, then I'm sorry, Donald, you're on your own. All right, Jewish activists shut down the Border Patrol headquarters in San Diego, demanding illegals be given free flu vaccines. What did those illegals ever do to you? Apparently, there is a French rapper who has a new song released bragging about the Great Replacement. And this was released by French rapper Yones, who states in the lyrics, "The Great Replacement, it's your daughter who likes me, who will make me children." So that's where they're coming from, is come on in and seduce and impregnate the young women of Europe in order to turn Europe into something else here. All righty, we had somebody who already talked about this. 14-year-old child hospitalized after being brutally attacked by multiple students on a school bus over a Trump hat. And apparently this was 8 black kids who jumped this guy. And apparently earlier in the day, they'd poured milk all over his head. And parents complained to the school administration, and nothing was done. All righty, we're going to take another phone call here. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I just wanted to go down the list of some of the stuff that's been going on under the cover of impeachment. You know, we got Project Guardian, the gun sweep on all the people that should have given up the guns, and then Trump's going to he's going to sign 1.5 million farm workers for amnesty. That was passed in the House. You don't hear nothing about it. None of this stuff has been on the news. And then, well, I think that your last caller was talking about how Trump is securing free speech on campus. Laugh out loud. I remember he had that about 4 months ago. He passed a thing that guaranteed free speech on campus. And I knew this was coming. But we'll just see how the universities deal with this. I don't know if there's going to be any pushback on it or not. It's hard to say. But I think one of Trump's greatest assets is his base, the white males. You know, when he went after Megyn Kelly and said that you know, how she was bleeding from the eyes and her nose and from other places, he really got a lot of white guys on his team because he was one of them. And yeah, there are so many guys out there that hate women over their lifetime, whether they divorced them or screwed them over somehow. And that's how Trump deals with them. That's how he communicates with them. And it's a hard thing to break apart. You know, I don't think his base is going to run on him. I mean, all this stuff that's been going on, you know, the guy's just got he's just got the touch. And so unless the economy goes into the dumpster and people really suffer, I see Trump's doing 4 more years and probably somebody else after that. And I wouldn't even vote for Trump even if Hillary comes in, Mike, because, you know, Trump's going to screw the Palestinians big time. That's all coming. I mean, so if you care about the Palestinians, I don't see how you can even vote for Trump because he's going to give them the green light.
Well, in my case, as was the case in 2016, it's not so much that I'm voting for Trump as I'm voting against Hillary Clinton because, I mean, that whole family is so unbelievably corrupt. And, you know, she's obviously got the juice to keep the heat off of her. We know that the Clinton Foundation does not actually qualify to be a tax-free 501c3, and yet nobody from the Internal Revenue Service has gone over there to say, we need to revoke your tax-exempt status, and you, the Clintons, are now personally liable for all the taxes on all this money you've collected. I mean, the Clintons are untouchable, and you need to ask yourself, why? What is it they are to the national security structure where they can get away with all of this corruption and all of this murder and this attempt to steal the 2016 election? certainly to rig the primaries and not have anything happen to them. Because to me, that makes them far more dangerous to the country than Donald Trump is.
I'll beg to differ. I beg to differ. Donald Trump is attacking our constitutional rights with red flag laws and telling us what we can say. And if you can't see that, well, geez, Mike, I don't know. Trump is way more dangerous than the Clintons, way more. The only reason why the Clintons are getting beat up on is because they took money from countries that don't allow Jews in their country. They took money from the Arab Emirates, and that just flipped the Jews out. So that's all that is. Their money, they take money from the Jews' enemies. That's why the Clintons Foundation is getting beat up. They're probably, no different than any other foundation.
Nobody's touching them. Nobody's touched the Clinton Foundation. Nobody's investigating it. Nobody's auditing it. They're immune.
Well, it's hard to say whether it's legal or not. I mean, there's millions of foundations out there, and I think what they did is they picked off the people that don't like the Arabs. She took money from the United Arab Emirates and all those other countries over there that don't recognize Israel. That's what she did wrong with that foundation. Okay, well, thanks, Mike. Thanks for taking my call.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. I mean, the bottom line is that to qualify for a 501c3, 51% of the money that you collect and raise must be used for charitable purposes, and the Clinton Foundation doesn't even come close. The amount of money they've actually spent on any kind of charitable work is in the single digits. They use Clinton Foundation money to pay for Chelsea's wedding. They collected a huge amount of money supposedly for Haitian relief following the big earthquake, and what they did instead is use that money to buy up prime Haitian real estate for resort development. And we know all about the dead bodies list. We know about the fact that Hillary may have actually been committing espionage with the use of that private email server. So I'm sorry, Trump is incompetent, but Hillary is dangerous, and that's just the way that I see it. Okay, so the phone lines are open, and we're coming up here on another commercial break in a minute. Now, down in the Southern California city of Claremont, they have the Holy Family depicted as being held in cages at the U.S. border, which is sparking a huge amount of controversy and conversations over the Trump immigration policies, forgetting that it was the Obama administration that started this whole program of separating children from the adults coming across the border. And everybody's out there saying, well, this is about perseverance against cruelty. This has got nothing to do with cruelty. This has to do with people who are breaking our laws by stepping across that border. That's what it's about. We'll be right back after these few minutes. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about the economic news, about immigration, about homelessness here. And we are now hearing reports of a second major annual conference that used to go to San Francisco every year. They have now decided from now on they're going to go to Las Vegas. Now, the company is based in Redwood City, which is right next to San Francisco. But because of all the poo in the streets, the discarded drug needles, and the human filth and the steak, Open World, which is this annual conference put on by tech giant Oracle, is now shifting to Las Vegas and will hold all their conventions there for the foreseeable future. Now, here's a really good one. Over in Seattle, they were going to have this little conference, if you will, an annual conference on solving homelessness. Oh, my goodness, we've got to solve homelessness. Sounds like a really good idea. How are they going to do this? Well, it turns out the Seattle leaders have hired a transgender stripper to basically grind on the conference attendees. I guess they think that somehow this will inspire and motivate them to come up with good ways to solve the homeless problem. I think most Seattleites can probably think that it's kind of a waste of tax money. Anyway, over in Virginia, there are 18 new sanctuary counties, leading to a total of 77 gun sanctuaries across Virginia. The governor of the state is out there saying, let the National Guard force counties to honor the gun control. So they're talking about calling out the National Guard on the citizens of Virginia who refused to go along with these violations of the Second Amendment. Now, the National Guard, for its matter, has come out on out and said, well, it's not really appropriate for them to get involved in this kind of issues. This has to be solved at the federal level. So somebody wrote this really cool open letter, it's in Health and Money News, to a free citizen of the sovereign state of Virginia. If you, my Virginian friend, are indeed serious about standing against the proposed tyranny of those whom a majority of your fellow citizens have seen fit to install as the arbiters of your liberty, this is assuming they won the election honestly, which has not been the pattern lately, then you have chosen a righteous or perilous course. Much of the nation is watching what is unfolding in your state. What you are attempting is no small thing and should not be undertaken lightly. Quite simply, you're telling your rulers you will not comply. They are not used to such effrontery by commoners, and be certain they are not amused. And basically, the rest of the letter is a warning saying that, if this leads to violence, remember, killing people is something the government is really, really good at. Not very good at building bridges or repairing bridges. They're not very good at keeping the dams running. They're not very good at keeping the trains running on time here. But by golly, they're really good at blowing other people's heads off. Apparently, up in New York, a consumer group has declared that Nerf guns represent assault-style toy weapons. Now, this is basically a compressed air gun that shoots a foam dart every time the user pulls the trigger, and it's already being declared it's an assault-style toy weapon. Ooh, bad assault-style weapon. It's a Nerf gun, for crying out loud. Also up in New York, there's a bill working its way through the state legislature would require all public colleges and universities in the state to make abortion medication available to students paid for with taxpayer funds. Now, here's an interesting little story, because there is this guy who forced his date to take an abortion pill, and he's being charged with murder. Well, whatever happened to that, it's only a blob of protoplasm that the woman can get rid of anytime she wants. Because I'm sensing a little bit of a double standard here in the approach. And that's been kind of my complaint about it all along, that it's always, it's the woman's choice. It's the woman's point of view. Husbands don't have anything to say about it. Boyfriends don't have anything to say about it. Fathers don't have anything to say about it. If it's the woman who kills off the unborn child, it's just a blob of protoplasm. If it's the guy who gives the girl a pill, a morning after pill, we're talking about the cells haven't even had time to differentiate yet, then it's declared a murder and he's in legal trouble. I think it needs to be one set of rules for everybody. And stop trying to think that you can engineer away the world's problems with biased, unfair laws. It just does not work that way. Okay, we're going to be taking another break here for commercials. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we will be right back just as soon as the music starts, which should be right about now. There it is. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, there's a very alarming article over here, and it has to do, this is in the Daily Mail over in Great Britain. And we have noted of late this tendency for these transgender clinics and doctors to just start transitioning children, little tiny kids here. And according to new research, up to 25% of these children being treated at transgender clinics may simply be autistic. And it's being misdiagnosed as gender dysphoria. So these attending gender identity clinics are many times more likely to show signs of autism than the population at large. So last night, critics said the figures called into serious question the practice of affirming a young person's chosen gender and putting them forward for potentially irreversible medical treatment without a thorough examination of their psychiatric condition. Well, I think that would definitely be a very important thing to do, because I think I have to be very honest, people going along with this, transgender transformation of children, they got to be crazy. I mean, to me, this is a form of child abuse. Now, when the child grows up, reaches adulthood, and they themselves of their own free will says, I want the doctor to whack my pee-pee off and turn me into a girl, that's one thing. But these parents, these adults who are out there saying, "Oh, I know that little Johnny really wants to be a girl," that's child abuse in my mind. Absolutely. So, alrighty, down near New Zealand, there has been a major eruption of what is called the White Island volcano. And this volcano does erupt on a regular basis. If you go to Google Earth and you go on down to White Island, and then you use that little time slider they have at the top there, and you'll back up and you'll see other times when it has erupted. But this one was pretty bad, and basically, it was a huge eruption. A lot of people got killed. A lot of people still succumbing to their injuries. Apparently, at one point, they lost a helicopter that landed and couldn't take off. Meanwhile, the tour company that organized this trip to the New Zealand volcano is facing a £750,000 fine and a £1 million compensation bill, as experts say that the Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines could be sued in the United States. So apparently there was an organized tour company that sent people over to this volcano and didn't understand it was just about to erupt. All right, Harvey Weinstein is back in the news. He has reached a $47 million settlement, which will wipe the civil slate clean. And basically, according to the Wall Street Journal, Harvey Weinstein, his former associates, insurers, and accusers have all reached a nearly $47 million tentative settlement of all the civil cases pending against him, about $25 million of which will compensate women who've accused the Hollywood producer of sexual misconduct. Now, under the terms of the agreement, and this is going to probably make you very sick, Weinstein and his former associates don't have to admit wrongdoing. And even better for Weinstein, the bulk of the settlement money will be paid not by him, but by his insurance policies, including those held by his former studio. So this guy basically is walking out of court. He doesn't have to admit he did wrong, and he doesn't have to pay the settlement. Boy, talk about, a justice system that is clearly broken. And I know I'm going to get emails saying, well, he's lost his career, hasn't he suffered enough? I lost my career back during the Vince Foster case. I've suffered enough. Anyway, let's get back to the Boeing 737 MAX. Boeing has really messed up. Apparently, the FAA analysis showed that there was a flaw in the 737 MAX that would likely result in a fatal crash every 2 to 3 years. But the FAA allowed the planes to carry on flying months before the second accident. It's only a bunch of tourists and everything. The FAA calculated that the Boeing 737 MAX could crash 15 times and kill 3,000 people, but refused to revoke its certification. Meanwhile, Boeing is facing a $3.9 million fine for installing faulty parts on 737 aircraft. And And the FAA said that Boeing did not sufficiently oversee its suppliers to make sure they complied with its quality assurance system. And again, Michael Crichton had a book out called Airframe. It'll never be made into a movie, but it is definitely worth reading. And it is about the way these issues are handled at the airline companies. FAA said Boeing was made aware of the issues by suppliers and still certified the jets as airworthy, which proved not to be the case. Well, now the situation has changed dramatically. Boeing could suspend or even cut output of the 737 MAX planes with a pause in production seen as the most viable option after the two deadly crashes. And in part, this has been brought about by investors in Boeing who are getting tired of all the rosy predictions and it's going to be fine and it's going to be back in the air, none of which have come to pass. And a lot of people are very, very concerned that Boeing used to run its aviation business kind of in two separated areas. One was the civilian product, which had a high quality assurance program and made sure the planes worked really well. Then there was the military side, which tended a little bit more to be, shall we say, cutting corners and value engineering, and that over the last several years, Boeing has kind of merged the management structure of both those two divisions. So now they're basically building the 737 MAXs with the same care that they used to build their military aircraft, which, by the way, if you look at it, military aircraft are not expected to have a long lifetime, because they are going into combat. They're not expected to run up a lot of times on that old Hobbs meter here. Alrighty, there is a new scam out there. And apparently this one involves the interception of email and the spoofing to make the email look like it comes from like your boss or supervisor at work, who tells you, I need you to go on out and buy some gift cards for me. And so the unsuspecting user goes and buys the cards. He spends cash for it. The cards are then sent off to wherever they're supposed to go. And then the victim finds out that it wasn't really their boss or supervisor who needed the gift cards. And worse, the cards have now vanished into the postal system. And gift cards are a great way to launder money. So you got to be very, very careful. I mean, there are more scams than legitimate calls on my cell phone. That's just the state of the warning here. All right, the FBI has arrested 3 men accused of running a $722 million cryptocurrency fraud scheme that allegedly defrauded thousands of investors. And it's one of the reasons why I steered clear of crypto schemes. The crypto space seems to attract some of the most unscrupulous promoters, and people who are looking for quick gains often get suckered into costly arrangements that may not be legitimate. And yeah, if it looks too good to be true, it generally is. So this FBI investigation has led to the Department of Justice arresting an indictment of 3 Americans who stand accused of running this $722 million crypto scheme. And apparently the men are charged by indictment with conspiracy to offer and sell unregistered securities, which is apparently the new definition. Another scam that was out there you need to be aware of. A guy was in the middle of selling his old home and buying his new home, and somebody got on in and spoofed an email from the title company as to where he was supposed to send the money to secure the title. Then a week later, he gets a phone call from the real title company. The money has disappeared. And in this case, fortunately, the title company stepped up to help him with a down payment on the new place. But, you know, he basically got set back 15 years. And what really angers me is you've got all these FBI agents out there who are so busy trying to bring down the President of the United States of America that they are not looking to get these cyber criminals. Yes, the FBI got these 3 that had to do $722 million worth of damage before they would be noticed. But we know that cybercrime is completely out of control in this country. Nobody really seems to care. Alrighty, something else you need to be aware of. It would be very reckless of you to leave your electronics in your vehicle, your tablets and your cell phones, because apparently thieves are now using these little apps that locate Bluetooth portals, and they'll walk around the car until they get a signal, and they'll know, oh, their iPhone, their tablet is right here on the back floor underneath what appears to be an old smelly blanket. And so that's where they'll break into the car. They don't have to break into the rest of the car. They've used the app to locate where your electronics are. Okay. This is one of the reasons why I don't like subscription software. Because I've seen this happen before, but this is the latest one. Now, there used to be a company called SecureROM. And it was a really bad digital rights management used by several publishers to protect video games, by which it mostly just annoyed legitimate buyers, got some of those publishers sued, and ultimately made the game unplayable on modern operating systems. And the track record is so bad, you'd kind of have to wonder, why is anybody bothering with this stuff? Because the cyber criminals just blow right past all this stuff. So back in 2010, Disney released the game Tron Evolution. The game was laced with secure ROM and suffered many of the same problems previously described. As an example of how you don't really own what you buy anymore, the game simply bricked when Disney decided not to renew its SaaS subscription for secure ROM software. In other words, Disney said, you know, we're spending way too much money on this thing, and they just pulled the plug. And everybody who was playing this game all around the world, it simply stopped working. And that can be a real problem when you're using licensing servers at somebody's company. They can just arbitrarily say, well, we're not going to bother with that anymore. Worse, they could go out of business. There was a company that made AV software that was subscription-based. Well, it wasn't really subscription-based, but you had to contact the license server to prove you were a valid license holder. And the company went out of business. Now, in this case, the company did the adult responsible thing. They put out installers for all of the applications that did not require the remote license server. And so everybody downloaded and replaced their applications, and they got back to doing some work. But sometimes you look at some of the decisions being made by these companies, and it's all about the bottom line. It's all about the money, and the usability of the product or service to the end user, it's just not really considered all that important. You have to wonder with Disney, what were they thinking, where they just arbitrarily shut off all of the Tron Evolution games? Now, if they wanted to basically go without secure ROM, I understand that. It was a problematic system. But do like this other company did. Put out a patch for Tron Evolution where it's not using the secure ROM anymore, that it's using something else. Don't just arbitrarily drop it. And I know Disney kind of gets a little bit arrogant. They weren't this way back when Walt was there. But after Walt left, and especially Eisner came on in, Disney's attitude was, we can get away with anything because we're Disney. Which I think for the upcoming Star Wars film, they may get a much needed dose of humble. But that's the attitude. We're Disney. We can get away with this stuff. No, you can't. People get very, very unhappy when the companies that they have bought these games from all of a sudden just turn them off remotely. What are these people supposed to do? Just go out and buy a new copy of Tron Evolution? I'm sure that's what Disney would prefer happens. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. And another example of how you don't really own what you think you've bought online. This one has to do with iTunes. The age of physical media is dying a slow, painful death. I still like those discs. Sorry, I do. But the convenience offered by digital is simply far too great to be ignored by customers. Well, not me. I generally don't tend to use them. But apparently, Apple can and will delete movies that you bought and paid for without any warning. We're not talking about how you've rented the movie for a fixed interval of time. We're talking about how you bought your own copy of the movie. And apparently what Apple is saying is the owner of that movie, the provider of that movie, has the option of simply pulling it from the platform, at which point, unless you found a way to download it and store a local copy, it simply vanishes from your iTunes store. And I don't think this is an appropriate way to be treating the customers either. So that's why I like DVDs and Blu-rays. Don't go away. They don't shut down. This idea of the stuff that you've already bought and paid for just quitting without any warning, that's pretty tacky. I think that's very, very, very tacky. All right, we are coming up on our last commercial break for today's show, followed by the last segment of today's show, followed by John Stadmiller's show, and we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program here on this Monday. And as you've probably already heard, the SpaceX satellite cluster, the Starlink satellites, are already causing a great deal of upset because they're highly reflective and they're disrupting astronomy. And the case was made where at one of these South American observatories, the satellites coming through the field of view something like 19 times in one night, which just really ruined things. So apparently SpaceX is saying that from now on, the Starlink satellites will be treated with a special coating designed to make the spacecraft less reflective and less likely to interfere with space observations. Apparently, the extremely bright coating had to do with keeping the temperature down, and they're saying that in order to have this less reflective satellite, it's going to have to operate at a lower degree of power. This, of course, won't solve the problem of the existing constellation of Starlink satellites, which are already up there. And frankly, I think somebody should have been thinking about this before they launched the first one. I think this was a very, very reckless situation. Okay, if you have an older version of the Samsung Smart TV, the BBC iPlayer will quit working. And it's caused by a software glitch. It prevents the BBC's iPlayer streaming service from running on many of the Samsung's smart TVs. Affected owners are being advised to download a software update. But the patch does not work on older models, which will have to wait until next year to get a separate fix. So the BBC has said that it expects thousands, but not tens of thousands of screens to be unable to use its catch-up service over Christmas as a consequence. Alrighty, if you're using the Ultimate add-ons for Beaver Builder or Ultimate add-ons for Elementor and have not updated them lately, you are apparently wide open to have your WordPress site hacked. And apparently hackers have already started exploiting this vulnerability in the wild within 2 days of its discovery in order to compromise vulnerable WordPress websites and install a malicious backdoor for later access. Meanwhile, over in Spokane, Washington, 649 rape kits are awaiting attention. An opioid crisis is raging, and a serial killer is out there running wild who has not yet been caught. Yet the city is going after a pastor who objects to a sexual minstrel show performed for children at the local library. This pastor tried to pray for the kids at a public library drag queen show, and boy, the city of Spokane, they're going to get him, by golly. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here on this Monday and get some things done. I'm trying to get this office finally squared away so I can get Claire here on the microphone on Fridays. So have a good evening. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. And please spread the word of RBN. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. We need all the help we can get. We've been good little girls and boys this year. You know, why can't we get the same costly toys that the bad little boys and girls get? That's what I want to know. So anyway, we'll be back tomorrow, and Aloha America.